Hello there, it's lovely to see you again on this new assembly that we're doing with Izzy, Graham and Eliza. And it's good to be with you again today. And we're going to start with a question. Just a thought. Can you think of people that you look up to and admire? Someone who does something so well, so fantastically well, that you would just like to be able to do that thing half as well as they do. Now imagine being asked to take over what they were doing. That was what it was like for Joshua when God told him to lead God's people into the land that God had promised to give them. He had to follow in Moses' footsteps. Now, just to remind you, Moses led God's people out of slavery in Egypt. God did loads and loads of miracles to make this happen. God spoke to Moses and gave the 10 Commandments, which even today are the basis of the laws of this land. Moses led God's people through the desert and organised them to build an amazing tent to worship in on the way, and was one of the most amazing people described in the Bible. Now God said that when Moses died, Joshua was to take over leading God's people. Wow, no pressure then.
There are some things that we associate with Joshua which show very clearly that he did a really good job of taking over from his hero Moses. Now, the first thing that God told Joshua was, be strong and courageous. And you know what the second thing God said to Joshua? Be strong and be very courageous. Now, Joshua was told to be strong and brave. And very importantly, he was also told that he should remember everything that Moses had taught him. And that is exactly what Joshua did throughout his life. Now, when it came to the end of Joshua's life, when God's people had the land that God had promised them and that Joshua had helped them to follow God, the people of Israel made their promise to follow God in the future, but also not to forget what Joshua had taught them. Now, Joshua had told them they had a choice. They could either follow God or they could just go off on their own and do something else. But Joshua said this really amazing and very important thing. He said, as for me and for my family, my household, we will serve the Lord.
Throughout the story of Joshua, there is one simple thing that we can learn. That when Joshua listened to God and the people listened to Joshua, everything went well. But if Joshua went off and did his own thing, or the people didn't listen what he was telling them that God had told him to do, everything went completely wrong.
One of the most famous parts of the story of Joshua is the way that God told him to take the city of Jericho. We're going to show you a video telling this story. Look out for the way that God helps Joshua be strong and courageous all the time. Also look out for Joshua's attitude that he and his family follow God. Every time God or the angel of God's army asked Joshua to do something, try to think whether what Joshua is being asked to do sounds like a good way of winning a battle. And notice how the people listen to Joshua and do exactly what they are being asked to do.
The Faithful Hall of Faith, Joshua. This is Joshua.
Oh, hey.
Joshua was the leader of the Israelites, who God used to bring his people to the promised land.
Yeah, let's do it.
When God told Joshua it was time to take the promised land, Joshua sent spies into the city of Jericho. While those spies were in Jericho,
Come on!
they were protected by a woman named Rahab. The spies promised to spare Rahab and her family when they took back the land.
Yay!
And she hung a scarlet cord from her window to remind them of their promise.
See you soon!
Now the Israelites had crossed the Jordan and were camped near the town of Jericho.
Hey, hello.
One day, Joshua looked up,
Huh?
and there was a man standing before him.
Hello.
The man said, "I am the commander of the army of the Lord." Joshua asked what the man wanted to tell him, and the Lord said he wanted Joshua to take the city of Jericho,
All right.
but that Joshua needed to follow his instructions exactly.
You got it.
Jericho was shut for fear of the Israelites.
Anyone home? Yeah, well.
No one came out and no one came in. So the Lord told Joshua to gather his soldiers and march around the city for 6 days.
Mary.
The priests were to take the Ark of the Covenant, and 7 priests were to go in front of it, blowing a ram's horn. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times and blow the horn. Then all the people of Israel were to give a great shout,
Then what?
and then the city walls would fall.
Whoa! Yeah, let's do it.
So Joshua said, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And the people did shout. And the walls did fall.
Let's go!
The Israelites overtook the city of Jericho as God had commanded.
Rahab.
They remembered Rahab because of her faithfulness. Joshua was faithful in carrying out God's commands, and the Israelites took many other cities as God told them they would.
Oh, nice.
For God will never fail to fulfill his promises. So the Israelites came to live in the land that God had promised Abraham, Isaac, Israel, Joseph, and Moses many years ago.
Notice that God asked Joshua to tell the people to do some really crazy things, and they did them all. He told them to carry the ark, which represented God being with them. He told them to blow trumpets and march around the city, and they did that too. And they did it so many times. That final day, they did it 7 times. They marched around, blew the trumpets, and they shouted, and the walls just fell down. Joshua and the people were strong and courageous, and they served God by doing just what he asked. And so for us, we're going to pray because we want to do that too. We want to be strong, and we want to be brave, and we want to do what God wants us to do. And so we're going to pray and ask him to help us with that. Father God, thank you so much that you have plans for our lives and that you want to be with us every single step of that plan. Help us to be strong and brave in whatever that looks like for us. Help us to do what you want us to do because we want to serve you. Amen.
Have you ever had a song stuck in your head? Well, you're about to have that happen to you now. Here are the Superbook Show dancers with Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho.
Jericho, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. You can talk about the men of Gideon, you can talk about the men of Saul, but there's one like good old Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, Jericho.